Hey guys, welcome to another GameXplain discussion. I'm your host, Andre Seegers, and this time we're joined by Derek Banner and Ash Paulson to finally discuss all of our in-depth thoughts on The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So let's get to it. Alright guys, I've been wanting to do this for a while, but we're waiting on your slow ass, Ash, to finally finish this game.
I take full responsibility for how long this has taken. It is completely my fault, but I did play the game for a good 140 hours, so I have a lot to say about it, but it just, it took me a long time between work. You guys know, and I've been talking a little bit about it, but I've been, getting onboarded at a new job recently, so It's been pretty tough to, find enough time, but I finally finished it.
That's totally understandable, given the fact, that you are basically working 3 jobs, and the fact that this is basically one of the longest games we've ever had to deal with, at least on the Nintendo side of things. This game is pretty ridiculous. I think my hours is right around what you have, and I still haven't seen everything in that game. So, there is so much to Zelda Breath of the Wild. At any rate, now that we've all had the chance to finish this game, I thought it'd be good for us to get together and really dive into our deep thoughts on every facet of this game. Whether, it's the exploration, or the story, or the voice acting. Just everything. And by virtue of that, there are 2 things I want to mention. For one, there will be spoilers here, so if you haven't been in the game yet, you might want to duck out. Because we won't be providing any more spoiler warnings. Secondly, just by the virtue of the fact that we'll be just comparing and contrasting every element of this game, this discussion probably will sound more negative in general than our overall thoughts of the game would otherwise reflect. So just a heads up on that. Even though it may sound like we are kind of being nitpicky here and there, we all truly do like this game. With that out of the way, Ash, let's start off with you because you beat the game most recently. You had the most recent impressions. What did you think of your overall enjoyment or overall playtime at Breath of the Wild?
Alright, well, if I was doing the GameXplain review, I would have given it a loved it. However, that comes with certain asterisks, and that is that it definitely is not my favorite Zelda game ever. It has not supplanted A Link to the Past. It hasn't supplanted The Wind Waker. Those are still my favorite Zelda games ever. However, I think Breath of the Wild is a monumental achievement, and I think Nintendo really should be applauded for what they were able to achieve with this game. However, there are certain polish issues. There are certain stumbling blocks, I think, where there are certain elements of the game that I think number among the worst in the Zelda series, despite the fact that the rest of Breath of the Wild is so damn good. So it definitely is most of the game I think is incredible and worthy of celebration, but there are certain aspects that I think really fall short compared to other Zelda games. So it's not perfect, but I really, really, really thoroughly loved my time with it.
Okay. How about you, Derek? What do you think?
I can pretty much agree with Ash there because I also greatly enjoyed it. I probably would have given it a loved it as well. But I'm actually very grateful for the fact that I've had so much time to ruminate on it. It's not me just coming straight off the game and having those gut reactions. That might not always be the same. Because you're coming off the high of this just fun, amazing, just big world that you're exploring, and just you really do get this high as you're playing Breath of the Wild with everything you're discovering, everything you're meeting. But, when you step away, take a little bit of time to look at what you did. It's funny. Those moments where Ash was like, I don't think this is the best in series. I don't think these are even that great. I think it's when it's following the conventions of classic Zelda. Oh, man. That's where it's...
Really?
Well, yeah, because the dungeons, not great. I mean, some of them were okay, but the lead up to some of the dungeons were good. But the dungeons themselves, when I first got to a dungeon for the first time, I was expecting a traditional dungeon, and it was just a big shrine, which was fine. I mean, you still had some fun with the puzzles and elements, everything going into. That was one of my big disappointments. But then you get to the boss, and it was kind of cool at the time, but as I kept going, it wasn't as interesting. Now, the only difference to that is the Hyrule Castle itself. I found going through Hyrule Castle to be just so much fun. I loved exploring every inch of that place, getting a sense of the history, fighting all the different enemies, all the different pieces of loot that you can find, and everything else. But yeah, that is probably my most disappointing aspect to Breath of the Wild, and that's the so-called dungeons, even though they aren't really. But everything else, I had very few issues. Now, as we start thinking about the specifics, more might pop up for me. But on a base level, I had a blast playing through this. I was always looking forward to jump back into it. With my busy schedule, me trying to get through games, it's always kind of a tricky aspect too. I'm surprised I beat it as quickly as I did because we just got lucky where we had a nice big open spot. Mm-hmm. where I could dedicate 5 hours a night to playing this game, and I think I don't know how much time I put into the game. I think it's around at least 120 hours. I don't know if I hit 140 hours, but I was pretty dang thorough, and I accomplished everything I wanted to, and I feel like I completed the game well. But I don't think it's my favorite in the series. What about you, Andre?
Well, before I get to that, I want to circle back to one thing you touched on, and that's the fact that you've had time to ruminate about the game and your experience. How has that affected your perception of the game? Like, do you feel not strongly now about it, like right after you had finished it? I mean, now that you've had time to process the game, or you brought it up. So I'm curious what you meant by that.
Yeah, After it, I would, it's very easy to say, I loved it, this is brilliant, it was so good. But now I see, like, once I finished it, I had a hard time, like, would this be one of my top Zeldas? And I think it still is up there in the upper echelon, but I don't think I would rank it quite as high as I would have afterwards. It's still very good, but I'm thinking more in terms of, like, a top 5 list, that kind of thing.
I gotcha. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I think you both, said it well. Like, this game does some fantastic things. But... I think I am going to be the kind of negative one here, and I want to, apologize, maybe explain this ahead of time. Like, just by virtue of the fact, again, of us discussing everything, it's going to make it sound like I hated this game when I didn't. I liked it a lot. I stand by everything I said in the review. But as you touched on, Derek, now that I've had time to, really process it, it's brought further clarity to why I felt certain ways during the review, even if I didn't fully understand why I did then. So, for instance, I had a line in the review where it said something along the lines of the awesome moments of this game are more fleeting than past Zelda games. And were I to review the game now, I'd be able to flesh it out better, because I now have a better grasp of why I felt that way. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, because we'll dive into the nitty-gritty later on. But yeah, I mean, I think this game was great. I had a really good time with it. I think it's a very important step for Zelda. Like, Zelda needed change. It needed to do something different.
Yeah.
And this game delivered that change. Thank God, because it's about time we needed it. So yeah, I applaud so much about this game. Making it open-ended again, like giving you options, letting you explore the world basically however you want. I think the game does a great job at that. On the other hand, though, I wasn't quite as impressed overall with it as my colleagues. And keep in mind, this, we're talking already on the upper echelon of the scale. But, everyone else is like, this game is scoring near perfect scores across the board. Whereas for me, I'm like, it's not quite there. Like, it has an amazing skeleton, a fantastic skeleton. I just felt like I was missing some of the connective tissue, something to kind of tie everything together better than it did. Because it kind of feels like it's a big open world just for the sake of being a big open world. And it doesn't really do much with it on a grander scale beyond the mere act of exploring. Which, again, I want to stress is fun. I had a great time going out there into the world and seeing what was there to find. And as you kind of touched on, Derek, it was almost like a high, like a sugar rush, if you will, where you're just finding new stuff constantly, and you're constantly rewarded in that way. At the same time, though, like a sugar rush, I felt it felt almost a little bit hollow. Like there wasn't something deeper there. Like I felt a little bit wanting at the end. And again, by just saying those words is making it sound worse than it is. But that's why, that to me is the separation from being a liked it a lot to a love it. So yeah, I guess to kind of wrap up my overall thoughts, I think that there are some amazing ideas here. They didn't fully deliver on their own potential. And that's why I look forward to the next game they do, because I think there's so much more they can do with the template that they've set up here.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, I said that I would have given it a love it, and I stand by that. However, I think that's because in context, I'm more okay with the things that I knew this game was going to have trouble with. Like, no one yet has been able to figure out how to have a compelling story in an open world game. Nintendo are not the first to fail at that. And in that sense, it's like, I think what Breath of the Wild does so monumentally well, like what you touched on with the exploring, Andre, there are some things that it absolutely... It's just like a revelation for open world games, but then it does stumble into those same pitfalls that open world games often do, such as the lack of a good cohesive story. I don't think the flashback mechanic worked for the stories. I'm just, like, unilaterally, I think the story in Breath of the Wild was pretty disappointing and really just represents wasted potential. And I think that might be kind of some of what you're talking about, Andre, when you say that, the skeleton is there and the meat is there, but maybe some of you said connecting tissue. I would say maybe the heart. I would say maybe some of the emotional resonance rings a little hollow. And I think that's because a lot of the story is really weak. I mean, pretty much all the story that you see take place has happened 100 years ago. Very little of it takes place in the present. And yeah, I think, I don't know, I had a problem with the way what the game was structured. But man, what Breath of the Wild does well, it does so incredibly well, and really, those things are revelatory for the open world genre, in my opinion. Like exploration.
Right.
Story is such a hard one, because I did my own Zelda discussion after I beat it, where I wanted to talk more about the characterization and the story that Breath of the Wild presented. And you're right, as much as I enjoyed the flashbacks, the memories, they just left me wanting more in the end, because they gave me a nice taste, but I wanted, like, again, going to Andre Sugar analogy, it was a nice piece of candy, but I wanted a full course meal. Like, give me more meat to this. And I got flashes of that as we were going through the present day.
Well, they are flashbacks.
Yeah. Yeah. But when... Like, there was, like, again, like, the moment when I first reached the Zora's domain, and you got how the Zora people are feeling. That's good story stuff, but otherwise, for a lot of it, the rest of it, you could really boil this down to almost a remake of the original Zelda for how little the story matters as you're going through.
I mean, if taken as a percentage of the game, that's probably true, actually.
Yeah, and it's also weird how, like, when you divide the story, between the four main story quests that you have to achieve before, getting 100% completion. It's weird how stark a difference there is between certain, like the Goron and the Rito have almost no story or lead up to their divine beasts. However, the Gerudo and the Zora have fantastic characterization and a great story leading up to their divine beasts, and it just made things feel a little lopsided. Like, I would go, like, I did the Gerudo quest as my second of the four, and I thought that was absolutely the best fleshed out part of the story. Like, I loved going to the Yiga hideout. I loved the characterization for Riju and Urbosa. Like, that, what I thought was the best part of the game in terms of story and characterization. And the Zora quest is not far behind. But then you get the Rito quest. I couldn't even tell you. I know Rivali, of course, but I couldn't even tell you what the name of his descendant was. He had so little to do with the game. You basically go to talk to him in the flight range, and then you are already fighting the Divine Beast, and then he exits the story. And then same thing with, what's his name, Yunobo, I think? Like, he gets almost no characterization. And so I just felt like the way these races were presented was so lopsided, and the way their stories in this world were presented was just so uneven. And I really thought that the Goron and the Rito really deserved a lot more care.
No, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that either, for sure.
Because with me, my first, and a lot of people have probably had this experience. The first story quest I went on was the Zora, because you go into that one region and there's just constant Zora. Hey, go this way to meet with our prince. Hey, go this way to meet with our prince.
Not for Asho.
All right, fine. I'll go meet your prince.
I ignored them. I got that too, but I was like, I'm not going to do this right now.
Asho's a rebel.
I did it.
Yeah,
Maverick.
Right?
I thought he was a Maverick hunter.
Oh, that's true.
Now I've got to hunt myself. That's not good.
Yeah, there you go. But no, it was a fun lead up, like working your way towards Zora's domain. That was fun. Meeting Prince Sidon, and again with the Zora, like them basically hating, at least the old timers hating Link for getting Mipha killed. And when I saw that, I'm like, holy crap! If they're going to do that for the rest of these, where there's this lingering just disdain for Link because he is a failure, I'm like, oh man, please give me more. And then it never happens again and is never brought up again. And I'm like,
yeah,
so much potential wasted there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're kind of touching on something here that ties into like a larger issue for me with the story. Like, none of the story really feels connected. Like, I like them in their own, like those stories we just mentioned in their own segments, but they don't really amount to much outside of that. And that's kind of an issue I have with the story in general, in that there isn't really an overarching one. Like, you see Ganon appear, and then you don't hear from him again until the very end of the game, or whenever you decide to go fight him. Like, I guess for me, I didn't feel any kind of urgency at all in the game, and no one seemed to care that Ganon is back.
Right.
Like, I'm like, okay, if they don't care, why should I care? Like, I'm gonna go fish with bombs or something.
Right. I mean, there are so many regions that seem to not be affected by the Calamity 100 years ago, or Calamity Ganon in Hyrule Castle in the present, like
Right.
all the people in the Akala region, or all the, even people in like Hateno or Kakariko, like they talk about it and it's like, oh, it's a big deal, and Ganon's there, and he's a bad dude, but like, okay, so what? He's in the castle, and everyone else seems like they're going about their lives very peacefully. And I know you're supposed to believe that, yes, at any moment, Zelda's power will run out, and Calamity Ganon's going to destroy the world. But it never feels like that. Like, kids are running around, playing in the villages, and everyone's having a great time, it seems,
Yeah, and it makes it feel even less urgent as you complete each piece, because now all of a sudden you got this huge beam going towards Hyrule Castle that almost feels like it's containing him as you're going along. And it's like, even, I don't know, you're right, there is less of an urgency there, and I understand why it's like that. Again, going to Ash's open world idea, it's
right.
like, it's, you have to keep them segmented because you can't have a general flow for how it's going to go. So each one sort of kind of gets its own theme, at least for the Gerudo and Zora they do. But, they just have their own little self-contained story. And I guess it's fine, but again, more connective tissue, have some kind of theme running through this. And I really think they missed the opportunity there by having it be Link's failure. He is a failure of a hero at the beginning, and they don't capitalize on that at all. And that's probably one of my biggest regrets as far as the story.
I don't know if I ever saw Link as a failure of a hero, though. I feel, once you get all the memories...
No, he is, and of course, he's not actually a failure, but it's been 100 years.
Sure.
He screwed up. Zelda screwed up.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
It is, it does seem like we missed a lot of the interesting stuff that took place in this world.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
I feel like one missed opportunity is, I think more could have been done with the flashback sequences. Like, I think it would have been really cool had those, and I actually mentioned this on Twitter, like as potential DLC, had those been playable bite-sized sequences where you actually do relive these things happening.
Or how about actual dungeons where you're like leading Zelda to each of those pools to try to pray and try to get the get the power
right.
of the goddess, and in order to get there you have to work your way through a dungeon or some kind of puzzle sequence in order to do that. I really think they could have done, you're right, they could have done something with that as well.
That would be an interesting way. Yeah, tie the dungeons into the flashbacks instead of them being like Divine Beast or something.
Mm-hmm.
Or even failing that, like the world itself almost is its own dungeon, just because there's, you have to figure out how to get from point A to point B. So even just having these flashback sequences playable, and the game tells you, okay, guide Zelda to the Spring of Courage. Well, right now you're at Hyrule Castle and you got to get to Mount Lanayru. So how are you going to get there? How you're going to protect Zelda while doing it? And how do you have to get around certain monsters? What is going to be standing between Hyrule Castle and Mount Lanayru to stop you from getting there? And those could have been playable to me.
Like, we know the world's dangerous. There's that one memory where Link is like 3 Lynels knocked out all around him. Like, how the hell did he do that?
Right?
I think, this kind of raises a point real quick. The thing I think that kind of disappointed me, like, I touched on how amazing, we've all talked about how amazing that January trailer was for Breath of the Wild. Pretty much everything awesome they showed off in that trailer was all in the flashback sequences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
all in the non-playable sections.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, even if they, I don't know, like, even if they were not all playable, I would be okay with that. It's just that the way the story was presented, all those things we saw in the trailer, they're all flashbacks, and you see so much of that by the time you've really finished the Great Plateau. Mm-hmm. Like, once you finish the Great Plateau, and King Rome has given you his flashback and told you everything he knows, and you have that whole story sequence, you've seen quite a bit of what that trailer has to offer in terms of those really dramatic story sequences.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of it didn't quite live up to presentationally. I guess the story presentationally didn't live up to what I hoped it would be. But at the same time, going into it, knowing that it's an open world game, I had a feeling that this might end up being the case. Like, again, Nintendo's not the first to fail at telling a really good story in an open world game.
Yeah, I hope that there is potential there to, or I know there's potential there to make it better in the future. So Nintendo hasn't quite figured it out. Hopefully they will with the next one. I think even something as simple as, like, just seeing, throughout the game, maybe it could be tied to either time or shrines beaten. Like, just even, like, little reminders that Ganon is there and causing ruckus or getting more powerful. You know, I feel like just something small like that could have really like enhanced the urgency of this. You know, I mean, I just felt like
you got the Blood Moon.
Which I like
amounted to almost nothing, though. Like, it looks cool and it's really creepy, but in
Yeah.
terms of the way it affects the game, it's almost nothing.
Well, then that's kind of how I feel about almost everything in this game. Like, it's in isolation, it's always cool to see something new, but then you realize it doesn't really tie into anything else beyond that. Like, this game is full of isolated, really cool moments that don't amount to much larger than themselves.
I would agree with that, except for the, like you said, the passion of exploration and just taking in that world itself. That to me is kind of the gift that keeps on giving in Breath of the Wild, is just that incredible world they built for you to go, you know, explore essentially. And for me, exploring that world without using a guide or an FAQ or something really did rekindle those feelings of Zelda 1, like really striking out into the unknown and just finding things and not really knowing what you're finding at first. And like I think the one memory that really stands up, my own memory, not Zelda memory, that stands out in my mind is I discovered the South Lome Labyrinth just completely randomly. I was just gliding around, and I look down below me, and I see this giant labyrinth maze type thing below me at the bottom of a canyon, and I'm like, what the hell? That's the coolest thing. Like, what is that? And you drop down into it, and a voice speaks to Link, and he's like, you've found this trial. I'm like, this is the coolest thing. And this is just out here waiting to be discovered. And mostly that feeling kind of kept up throughout the whole game for me, which is why I think it was so damn impressive. But yeah, you know, some of the stuff around that, tying it all together, not so impressive.
Yeah, I mean, that gets back to my, like, you know, good bones, it's missing the connective tissue. But I agree.
Right.
I mean, the exploring is a highlight of the game, and actually kind of tied into the story element. I loved how you actually had to find the memories based on the photographs. Like, I love that. That was such a great idea, and I actually wish there was more of that. Like, that was such a unique thing that actually made use of the open world. It's like, okay, well, I know that mountain, so maybe I can kind of, like, figure out where that memory should be. And I really enjoyed that aspect. I actually wish I did more of that, and I'm kind of hoping the DLC kind of focuses on that idea, because it kind of uses the limited knowledge you have of the world up to that point, and trying to figure out, like, this, you know, world scale puzzle in a way. I mean, not quite world. That may sound more impressive than it is, but you know what I mean. It was a cool idea.
See, now you're making me feel like a bum, because I only did that for one of the very first memory. That's the only one I did without any help. Otherwise, I stumbled on one other. But otherwise, I went to the painter dude every time. It was like, oh,
Me
cool,
too.
new location. Where's the painter dude at? There's where the memory is. Cool, I'm gonna go that way. And I'd always immediately find it. So I didn't actually have that same sense of, like, where is this located at? I just was naturally able to find it.
I love that idea. Like, I mean, I use the painter sometimes too. Don't get me wrong. But no, I really enjoy, like, not having any clue where they were besides the pictures, and having to figure it out based on those.
Yeah, I used the painter for some of them. I probably for most of them, like you, Derek, but I definitely found a few on my own. And I love the fact that for the final memory, you can't get help. Like, you do have to rely on your own knowledge of the world and where everything is to figure it out. And, I mean, I figured out it was Fort Hateno immediately from the picture. But still, like, I do like that the final memory really does make you rely on your own knowledge of what you've seen while you're out and about.
Right.
And you can't just go talk to the painter and have him point you in that direction. So I did like that.
Exploring is definitely the big thing about this game. I mean, I think that's one thing most people would agree on. Like, that's what makes this game what it is. That is what's so fun about it. It is really, I mean, this sounds a little bit dismissive, and to some degree it is, but it really is, like, for me, like a 100-hour sugar rush. Like, I'm just seeing stuff all the time, like, what's over there? And then go over there and check it out. And that's what's so fun, is just, you do have this massive world where it really, I mean, the world really is your oyster. You can just go wherever you want. I mean, you can even climb. I mean, what separates this game from other open world games is, from a top-down view, nothing is off limits. You can climb every mountain. You can go on top of every building. You can fly around them if you want. Like, there is nothing, literally nothing is off limits, really. Unless you reach the edge of the world, which is a little bit weird how they pop up that message, but whatever. But yeah, like, that's what's fun about it, is the game does kind of reward you just going out there and seeing seeing what there is to find, especially since there are shrines everywhere, which kind of provides an inherent reward mechanic for going out there and searching for them.
Yeah, and I'll say this, I got hooked so badly on finding shrines. I love those things. I mean, yeah, they all look samey. I mean, and maybe more could have been done to diversify them a bit, but I liked the shrine puzzles. I liked finding shrines. For me, that was a huge draw. I got so addicted to searching out shrines and just finding new ones. And I did finish the game with all 120 found, and I think I only used a guide to find like 3 of them, so I'm pretty happy about that.
That's pretty good, yeah.
Yeah.
That's really impressive.
Yeah, I've pretty much, I think I did about the same thing as you, Ash, where I think there's only like 1 or 2 I needed help to find, but I did find most of them on my own, and I was trying to be as thorough as possible, and yeah, it was always a exciting moment whenever I found a new shrine or a puzzle that led to a shrine, and seeing what you'd get. And at the very least, it was always nice to get one of those orbs. The actual reward inside may not always be the best, but there's still something you can get excited about, and just, a puzzle, something to do, a hard fight, or a moderate challenge, or a modest challenge, or something like that. Those were always enjoyable, and they just also served a functional purpose too, just being able to tie them into your quick travel. Brilliant idea. That is one of the smartest things they've ever done, is just tying in these rewards. So yeah, you're maybe not getting the best item in them, but at least you're getting a spirit orb and you're getting a teleportation point.
Right.
That's 2 rewards for every one that you go to, and that's definitely worthwhile. And say what you will about the Korok seeds. At least that was something like, no matter where I went, no matter how, even if an area was dull, I was still keeping my eye out for places for Korok seeds. And let's be honest, there were very few places that felt dull in this in Hyrule as you're exploring.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
You touched on a lot there.
Sorry.
So no, it's good. I mean, I agree. There aren't any places that feel dull. I remember when someone asked me during my Q&A, and granted, this is still pretty early into the game, like, does the world feel empty? And at the time, I said no. And even while playing it, it didn't. But then I look back on, in hindsight, and I'm like, well, actually, it kind of is. Like, when I think back to specific moments, there aren't really that many specific locations that come to mind, because there is a lot of traveling where you're not, where you're really not doing anything except going from point A to point B. Or maybe not necessarily even that, because you're just kind of exploring for the sake of it. Like, you don't even know what point B is at that point. You're just kind of wandering around. And that is fun. But I do think, like, so much of this game is dependent on, that sense of discovery, which, again, this game does a great job of. But at the same time, I don't know if I really ever want to replay it, because you can't recapture that sense of discovery again. Once you know it, you can't relive that unless you have a terrible memory, which granted I do. So maybe I can't go back in a few years. And I think as part of that too, what's funny is there were a few instances where I was talking to someone else. They would tell me about something, or they would mention a location I hadn't been to yet. They're like, oh man, you gotta go there. You gotta go check it out. And every time I would go to one of these locations, I'd be disappointed. Like, they way overhyped it. And I think so much of it is coming across this stuff naturally by yourself, without knowing what's there. But as soon as you have, like, any inkling of what could be there, I think it at least for me, it ended in disappointment. So Eventide, like, that's one of the ones I had heard about, and I got there, I'm like, okay, it's a challenge where I don't have any weapons. Cool, I guess. Like, I was expecting more just from what I had heard. And if I had come across it more naturally, I probably would have enjoyed it more than I did. But I think that kind of ties into, what I was saying, where, like, the raw sense of discovery is what's so important, that I don't know beyond that if I'd want to replay this.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I mean, I feel like the same could be said for a lot of games, but a lot of games aren't 140 hours either. Like, like A Link to the Past, I may know every inch of that game by heart, and I'll probably know every inch of that game by heart for the rest of my life, but it's such a pleasure to play. It's a quick, easy play. Like, I can play that and finish it in 10, 15 hours and have a wonderful time, as opposed to Breath of the Wild, where, I know everything out there, but it takes 140 hours to see it all again.
It wouldn't. I don't think it would, though.
Well, no, it wouldn't. That's true. Yeah. You can probably. That's what's so weird. You could probably finish up all the main story quests in 20, maybe even less, 15 hours, I would say.
Probably. Yeah. I would think so.
If you know exactly where you're going, yeah.
Exactly. Derek, I want to get back to the Korok seeds, because I totally disagree on those. When I was first finding them, I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like, they integrated them well into the world. I agree with that. like they did a great job making them feel like for them to stand out while not really standing out at the same time. Like if you know what to look for, they did feel rewarding for finding them. But as soon as I realized that the reward for finding them almost didn't matter at all, that's when the whole idea of the Korok seed just fell apart for me. Because, and there's a couple issues related here. One, I went the longest time without even knowing where the hell to find that stupid giant Korok again. So I couldn't even make use. I mean, I think that's a glaring issue with the game, where it's like, where is this guy? I have all these Korok seeds, I don't know what to do with them, beyond the first time you find him, or maybe first 2 times.
I had the same problem.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people did. Like, they mentioned once, like, where he goes to the forest, and then it's like, well, I don't remember where that forest was. So where's that Korok seed forest or whatever? But also, so, you know, as I mentioned, like, I was able to upgrade my stuff initially when I first found him. But I quickly reached a point where, well, you know, once I could hold, like, 10, 15 items, I'm like, all right, I don't need to hold it anymore. At any given time, I have 10 badass weapons, and you're always picking up more stuff than you need anyway. That the idea of the Korok seeds completely fell apart for me, and especially once I beat Ganon, that's when I'm like, well, there is absolutely no point at all for defining these. And I think that's when really the idea of the lack of connective tissue really became apparent to me. Is that when I beat the game, it's like, well, man, so much of this stuff really doesn't matter. You know, like, it felt more fun to find when I thought they had a greater context in the game, when it really doesn't amount to much. And so I would say to people, if you're playing through this game and you want to get as much value out of it as possible, hold off on beating the game, because I feel like the incentive to do the rest of it drops sharply once you beat it, or once you beat Ganon.
Well, I did stop playing after I beat Ganon, but I was at like 45% when I think I had 47% completion rating once I finished, because I did find 250 Korok seeds, and I think I knew what the reward was, and it didn't diminish me wanting to find them. I think that's a key difference between you and myself, just because, you know, you looked at the reward and thought, I don't need that, and you also have issues with the item management in this game, and I never really had the same issues with the item management that you did. It could be annoying at times, but I did feel like finding the Korok seeds and expanding my inventory all of a sudden solved that issue, because I had a place for a torch, an axe, the fire rod, the ice rod, the thunder rod, you know, various types of weapons that I could use if the occasion needed it, as well as my badass weapons lined up, and then I didn't really have to change out much until one broke. And I felt like that was extremely useful in my gameplay to have all those options available, and I made sure to fully upgrade all my weapon slots. Now, I didn't find enough Korok seeds to fill out all my shield slots, which shield and arrow and all those other slots, but shield and arrows were also a lot less important in my mind than overall. But I also think that you are right to a certain degree with the Korok seeds. Once you find enough to upgrade all of them, I'm pretty sure there's plenty more to still find in the game. And so all of a sudden, like, once you upgrade all your slots, then the Korok seeds really are just getting them all to get them all. And we've already seen what the reward is for that, and it's crap.
It's literally a turd, which is both hilarious and kind of offensive at the same time. It's like, even the developers are conceding, yeah, it's not worth your time. If you did, you wasted your time to find these all. So, I mean, I guess I feel like they could have. I felt like they could have provided a better reward for finding the Korok seeds. Not even finding them all. Just, I think they could have tied them into the gameplay better. And here's my idea. I think what they should have been used for, instead of inventory, which is weird to me, they should have been used for improving your the abilities you get for at each divine beast, or from, you know, the champions, your champion abilities. Because I almost feel like those were overpowered. I think it would have been awesome is if you learn the ability at the Divine Beasts and you upgrade them to the Korok Seeds. That will provide a real incentive to find the Korok Seeds, as well as making it feel more rewarding for finding them.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a good idea.
I do mostly agree with Derek on this about how it didn't bother me as much. I do see what you're saying, Andre, but I think my counterpoint to that is that Breath of the Wild is hardly the first game to have a really crappy reward for 100% completion. And my example for that, or my first example for that, is your very own Super Mario 64. You only need 60 stars to beat the game, but you can spend all this extra time searching for 120, and you get one of the original worst rewards ever, which is to visit Yoshi on the roof. And
man. This is a whole nother debate in and of itself.
You're right. Okay, fine. So then let's table that for a second. Ocarina of Time. Get all the skull tools. What do you get? A regenerating gold rupee. It sucks. It's not the first time Zelda or even Nintendo has done this and basically given a crappy reward for 100% completion.
Get all 120 shines and get a t-shirt, I think, or sunglasses.
Or something. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Even the Galaxy games, I don't think, had amazing rewards for getting all the green, in Galaxy 2, getting all the green stars. You can play as Luigi,
No, you're absolutely right. And I think my complaint more isn't with the 100%ing. I'm fine with that. I mean, I think it's more the fact that they are kind of like that is a literal turd, kind of is symbolic of the Korok seeds in general.
So are the other Korok seeds, let's be honest. They're just smaller turds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of true. So, I mean, I don't want to harp on the point too much. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. But I felt like they could have been used in a better way than they were, because the inventory thing was weird. Because for me, actually, Derek, you mentioned it solved your problem. For me, expanding the inventory made it worse. Because I meant on the quick select, I had to scroll through more crap to get to the stuff I wanted. Whereas, having a smaller more managed inventory, it's like, okay, I got to focus on the stuff I need instead of having 20 slots full of like Deku sticks or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that's your fault for picking up that many Deku sticks. Yeah. No, I was just because the only time inventory got really annoying is when all the items I was the materials I was picking up over time, trying to search through all of those. And even then I was I learned where each one was. As I played with my 120 hour playthrough, I learned where everything was. So it never became an issue for me. I think that's...
Yeah, I mean, so... I think our gameplay history plays into a lot of this. I have a low tolerance for nonsense. Even finding the right healing item took way too long for me, where I'd had all this food cooked, and if I needed one with a special ability, I had to sort through 5 different pages, and there was no way to even jump between sections. You had to go page by page by page to the next, to the next genre of your inventory, like whether it's weapons or food or materials, and just that. Just doing that over and over and over really just kind of grinded away my enjoyment a little bit. Where, again, I still like the game a lot, and I know it may not sound like I did, just because I'm harping on all these little issues that added up for me, that prevented it from being loved. But, I felt, just the inventory in general. I don't mind the items breaking. I know that was a big issue for Jim Sterling, for instance, but I do mind the fact it was more what happened after that, where I had to go into the inventory, equip something new, and this is happening constantly. So breaking items is fine. It's re-equipping that sucked afterward. And I wish it would just if it just auto went to the next weapon maybe, or if there was a quick select button to just instantly pull up your next most powerful weapon. And as part of that too, I really wish when you had a full inventory and you open the chest and it reminds you of that, and you have to...
Yeah, if you could just swap them in the menu, that I agree with. That was dumb.
Totally agree.
That would be such an easy fix. Just do a quick swap or quick drop. You drop your weakest weapon. I don't even care what's my weakest weapon. Drop whatever weapon. Choose a weapon randomly. I don't give a crap. Just let me open the chest and take what's in there.
I will say that on the whole, while the inventory problems didn't bother me or hamper my enjoyment as much as they did you, I agree that in general, the inventory system in Breath of the Wild is inelegant, and there are certainly problems that I had with it. The biggest one of them being what you just mentioned about the treasure chest issue. There absolutely should have been a quick drop, option for when that happens. But I will say that when I had a weapon break during battle, I didn't feel like it was any problem just to hit the quick select button, scroll to a new weapon, and keep going. That didn't bug me at all. I didn't feel the need to pause. I was able to equip a new weapon from the quick menu and just keep going. So that didn't bug me as much, but I can see where you're coming from, Andre, and absolutely, I think at best you could call Breath of the Wild's inventory system inelegant, like I said.
Yeah, I'd agree with that at best.
Yeah.
And that's where we have to cut it off for now, but we'll be back with part 2 in which we discuss even more about the game, such as divine beasts, boss fights, and lots more, so stay tuned for that. And as a quick reminder, yes, I still like Breath of the Wild a lot. And speaking of liking, if you like this discussion, make sure to like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GameXplain. You can find links to those in the description below. It's a good way to keep up to date on everything we post. And of course, make sure to stay tuned to GameXplain for lots more on Zelda Breath of the Wild and everything else Nintendo Switch as well. Catch you later. Bye.